second. Oh, Rabbi Weissman is at 6. No, that's okay. I'm just opening it up. Nobody's in there yet. So Cherry thought he might be a rag doll.
But the truth is, I think that this week's parasha, this week's portion, and the weeks to come, until the end of the book of Genesis, are very, very central to one of the objectives, one of the deeper challenges and objectives and that the Jewish people need to, it's a challenge that we need to overcome. And it's actually, I think it's deeply something that God wants us to rectify and fix, that is still with us. And that is, deep discord and infighting and actually hatred, right? Between brothers, between Jews, one against another. And how we have to try to uproot that and really bring to the opposite of that. And but obviously the Torah is also a message to everybody, to all people, particularly the book of Genesis. So, and all types of, as we know, said so many times, any type of rational and moral lessons are for all. And so clearly these parshas, these portions, are here to teach us the dangers of discord, the dangers of infighting, and that really needs to be fixed. And when I say fixed, I mean to say going above and beyond. I mean to say forgiving when maybe you'd think that according to the letter of the law, I don't have to. In other words, going out and seeking peace beyond what would be required. And kind of a little bit bending over backwards and looking the other way to bring peace and to take maybe a bit of a humiliation and to bring peace. In other words, what I'm saying is self-sacrifice for peace, self-sacrifice for unity. I think it's a very rational thing too, by the way. I mean, I've actually often thought about it in my own, among family. And I think it's something people used to understand a lot better. Cheyenne says, obviously, Israel, yes. But, and we're taking that a little bit farther now, but look at this very just simple kind of rational. I mean, people often experience this with their children as they get older. Things that they have to maybe overlook, if they have sense, if they want to keep a good relationship with their children. At a certain point, you have to stop, trying to press them or criticize them and things that you don't like because they've taken a slightly different path. Because you know what, they're not gonna visit as much. They're not gonna listen. They're just gonna get annoyed. So there's really isn't any point to it. So that's maybe a little bit of a side point, but what I mean to say is that for the sake of peace within the family, for the sake of unity, that people should continue to work together and help each other. If we constantly point out everything we don't like about people in our family, whether it's children, a husband, or more distant family, it causes tremendous rifts. And I think just that everybody has someone in their family who's in a fight and a feud with someone about something that they said at a wedding, 25 years ago, 40 years ago, and they still don't like them. I mean, that is the danger of being a stickler about being insulted, or someone, or in other words, what I'm saying is of standing on principle, when people feel, no, that's not right, they shouldn't have said that to me, that was very wrong what they did, blah 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 blah. Well, it's very wrong. The thing is to hold and to strengthen a dispute is even worse. stop, let it go. Let it go. It's because why? Because it's more important that people should be at peace and work together and be able to talk to each other than the fact that the person, didn't bring you a gift, that, brought you a cheap gift at the wedding of a kid or birthday or this or that. I mean, it's never ending. We can't really be close with anybody if we have all these expectations and then people don't live up to them and then we're angry with them. We'll end up very alone. It's not a way to live. And but again, I think all the things we've been learning about helps a person accomplish something which is just so rational and sensible. There maybe were times along, in the past where families needed each other more, and people might have done this just for self-interest. Look, you have to work together to maybe farm or, at a family business. And, so people just got along to get along a little bit more. I don't know. Not so sure about it. These problems go back a long time, these type of problems. But, again, if a person has a relationship with Hashem, if a person has this religious mindset that we talk about so much, the person says the blessings in the morning, and with meditation, understands that they've been given so much, and that there's a God that loves them, and has a plan for them, really. And often, even though they don't understand it, it can be sometimes difficult, but that there's an ultimate truth, a true good out there that's coming their way. God is trying to communicate with them and lead them and give them. But yeah, again, even in a very practical way, we've said so many times, all the good that we've had, everybody here, everybody in this room, anybody who's going to be listening to this who speaks American English, has less an innumerable amount of things to be thankful for. Being born here, this age, this time, people, you could talk about a lot of things not to be thankful for, but how about looking about what we should be thankful for? That's often what people don't do. Anyway, I've talked about this so many times, but the reason I bring it up here again is simply because when you have that attitude, it's a lot easier if you're coming from gratitude and you feel more of a wholeness within yourself because God, is with you and is like a second parent to you. You don't have this void and need of all these expectations from people around you, which people will never satisfy everything that you need. It's just never going to happen. So stop trying to get it because you're wasting your time. And if we have the approaches of the Torah and of the Lubavitcher Rebbe of asking yourself, okay, what can I do? It's about what I can do for others, and that gives me something rich and something, a treasure, an eternal treasure, by doing for others. And you start from that perspective as opposed to thinking, what do they owe me? I'm owed such and such, and this is how people should be treating me. If you start from that perspective, it's not just that you end up doing a lot of good deeds in your life, but you also avoid all this discord. You avoid because you're not in there thinking about what everyone should have said and how they should have acted, and they better act, and they should, and then they don't, and you're not talking to them now, or you got to tell them in front of everyone how they did the wrong thing. It's very, very damaging. It's very damaging to children. It's very damaging to just the family as a whole. We need to prioritize being together because we have more in common than the things that we don't have in common. And people, the idea of being very fixated on these negatives is a sickness. And we all have it a little bit because we're so spoiled. We have so much, and we were born into it like that, and we take it all for granted, and we so many reasons why, but it's very it's not true. It's not true. It's not reality. It's only focus on what we don't have is not honest. And to be upset about all things we don't have, and we have, so many people I don't know. So there's so many things to be thankful for, and just put a smile on our face, and let's be in that place and feel that richness of the things we have and appreciate the things we have. But again, it's all tied together, because when a person has a relationship with Hashem, with God, and is studying Torah and praying, and then because God is this perfect completeness, so when you connect with him, you feel a little bit of that in yourself. You feel more whole. You feel more at peace, because when you touch on the infinite, there's no like just an edge of an infinite, and you're getting the whole thing. So in other words, that your connection with perfection and with peace, which in the word for peace and completeness and wholeness is the same in Hebrew. Shalem and shalom is almost the same word. Because when you're complete, then you're not in aggression with others, right? You're happy with what you feel, whole within yourself, and you don't have to lash out. And we all know that most people, the reason why that they're aggressive with others, either violent or nasty, is because something very wrong inside. They're really angry at themselves. They're lashing out the anger they feel. That's just like there's a Gehenna inside. There's like a hell in there that's coming out. It's like they open their mouth and like the dragons are coming out at everyone around them. It's horrible. But it's something we have to think about when people maybe misbehave towards us or abuse us. I guess if I use the word, I don't know if I even want to, but verbally, and think about it, and you'll realize, oh my, master of the universe, these people have real problems. There's a lot of pain. Something is just sick there. Something is very missing, broken, hurting, in there, that they're so angry. And sometimes that's they themselves. They feel very angry at their own lives. They feel like a failure, and so they're lashing out and blaming others around them. And so when they're hitting out at others, it's really themselves. That's not an excuse for them. However, it just, in order we should understand and not be as hurt or feel that, oh, this is about us, something wrong with me. So Rav Nachum talks about it a lot, but it's also in Chabad Hasidus and other places, and just is that a small person gets angry about small things. A child gets angry about very trivial small things, and the bigger the person, so the more it's going to take to get them angry, because they only take things seriously that are very, very, very important and very meaningful. They're not going to get angry at small things. So I think it's really, it's look what happens to look what happens to the tribes. Look what happens to Jacob's sons. Because they did this, because they got into this dispute, and they had violent reasons for this dispute. You can understand. The truth is, when you look at the portion and you read the beginning of it, it's quite. The beginning is quite astounding. It's hard to follow the whole thing. On the one hand, you see that Joseph is really the apple of his father's eye, and there must have been good reason for it. And you do see that he stood up for the sons of the maidservants, but at the same time, he's reporting back, all this bad criticism about his brothers to his father. It's hard to understand. It's kind of like you think to yourself, Joseph, what were you thinking? Like, this is not going to go in a good direction as far as your relationship with your brothers. Clearly he felt they were doing things wrong that he wanted his father to fix. The translation that I saw was that, he just, anything they did wrong, he reported to his father. Well, that's that's not going to lead in a good, that's going to lead in a way. And but I guess that's my point. My point is that of course Joseph meant well. His father loved him, and I mean, Jacob was the la creme of the patriarchs. They say that the sages say that the facial image of Jacob was like the facial image of Adam, like he had turned to such a state of spiritual, moral perfection. So he didn't love Joseph for no good reason. I mean, Joseph, and as Rashi says, he transmitted the bulk of his Torah to Joseph. So of course, Joseph was on a high level, and maybe in a certain sense, he was superior to his brothers in intellect and knowledge of Torah. And maybe that's the reason he was reporting to his father that maybe they were doing certain things, maybe they weren't quite. Although Rashi seems to explain that Joseph was mistaken. But in any event, the point is that I think one of the things we learn from this is like you can be right and be wrong at the same time. He was right, but something wasn't right, because if he was right, then this whole situation of the children of Israel going down to Egypt, maybe it wouldn't have happened. I don't know. And we also see later, I mean, one thing we know, that what the brothers did of selling Joseph, this was something that has remained with the Jewish people for a very, very long time, as something that there's like some kind of I don't know how to say it, refinement and atonement that they have to do for this. That this is not, I mean, you think about it. This was the beginning of the people, the beginning of the nation. And it started with such a terrible rift. Obviously, there's something that's a problem that has to be fixed, even though they were so high. And I would say because they were so high, that's why these problems can occur. In other words, because you have people very intelligent and very high level spiritually, and they have very strong opinions. Just like the righteous and of later generations, great rabbis had terrible disputes. However, as it's brought down that, I mean, generally it was for the sake of heaven. They didn't really dislike each other personally, but they had very strong views about ideologically. But that's the point too, is that, but what I'm trying to bring out is that great people have great disputes. They differ. I mean, different minds have different, and people also can get upset about things. And obviously Joseph saw things in his brothers that he felt he had to say something about. I think the same thing you have to say about the dreams. What was he trying to say with these dreams? Why in the world? I mean, that's another thing. It's like you read it, you say, what is he thinking? Why is he reporting his dreams to his brothers? Like, he just wants them to like find him in a corner and beat him up. I mean, it seems like he's looking for a licking. I mean, you should, God forgive me for, please Joseph for beginning me speaking in these terms. I'm trying to bring out the appearance though in the verses. The appearance in the verses is like, he's a 17 that he's going to his brother and say, hey, guess what I dreamed? That's what it appears like, right? And you're saying to yourself, what are you thinking? They already don't like you. You're reporting all this stuff, so you're making them look bad. What are you saying exactly? You're telling them that you're going to be a king over them? You think that's a good idea? Why? So the answer is obviously the reason is that because this was a theological dispute. At least that's how Joseph saw it. It's just an ideological dispute. His point was to say to them, I'm right. I have this. God is like a voice from heaven is saying, my view of how the Torah, of how we should serve God is the correct one. And that's what he was trying to tell them, an ideological, I'm right. I'm telling you, I'm right. They were having an argument, but the brothers didn't see it that way. And even if they did, they felt like you can't push we're the majority. You can't push your opinions on and shove it down our throats. And it became personal. That's why the Torah doesn't tell us the ideological, because it's not important. it's not important because in the eyes of heaven, there was some degree of personal element that seeped in, and that ruined it. And that was enough. From the heavens perspective, our reasons, heaven knows the truth. I mean, you think this is also so deep. You have to think about it psychologically, like within yourselves. Sometimes we say all these things to a wife, a colleague, and we have all these justifications, and then, it's very hard to be honest and realizing, this is really about you, isn't it? This is about yourself, something. All these reasons you're giving and everything, but deep inside, this is really, even if it's just because, why do you have to make a big, why don't you just keep it? If the person's not going to listen, so why are you saying it for? It's like sometimes we can have good ideas, but it's not that. It's how we're going about things is the problem. Like we could be 100% right, but sometimes we have to keep quiet because there's nobody who's going to listen. Just to make a fight, I have an opinion. I'm going to write. So you know what? You write it down in a book, and maybe generations from now, teach it to your children, and maybe someone. In other words, my point is, if you tried, and here Joseph has tried to communicate with the brothers, and they've rejected his approach. They don't agree with his approach. What exactly was his approach is another question. I mean, one very I would say popular or common understanding, and I think you see this from later on, it's only something that we can tell later, is that Joseph believed in engaging in the world, and he believed in, developing a relationship with God that allowed you to engage and still remain true. And the other brothers said, no, that's not our approach. Our approach is we're shepherds, and we keep a little bit aloof from the rest of the world because otherwise we'll be affected. And that's the right approach. Don't, your approach, we don't accept your approach. Maybe they were saying, they could have even meant that, look, we don't even disagree maybe that your approach is for a select few, but this isn't an approach to, for the masses, and you have to keep it to yourself. You can't make yourself king and rule, meaning say, and push everyone to have your worldview. We don't accept this. So that's one approach, but that just to, there may have been, the Torah doesn't exactly tell us, but the point is that they were talking about an ideological point, and the brothers, they didn't agree, and they didn't believe in that he should put, and it's interesting, they're actually right in the sense that we go after the majority, right? And we don't follow voices from heaven that say something. Joseph wasn't right about that, unless you could say before the giving of the Torah there may have been a different approach. That could be the case, but this answers all the problems with the verses, because otherwise it's very very strange, and we can't understand why Jacob would love this. Why did he love? I mean, otherwise you're simplifying, you're bringing it down to a very low level, which I don't accept. Just to say that, basically you have to go about saying Jacob, loved Joseph because he was Rachel's son. You make it into a Greek story, and this isn't a Greek story. This is a Hebrew. This is a Jewish story. And there we read it according to the Masorah of the rabbis. Otherwise, you're bringing it down to the level of, of the Greeks, God forbid. And this is forbidden. This we won't do. And so in other words, the point is that clearly Jacob loved Joseph because he was on a high level. And therefore we're left with this question. Well, then why is Joseph harassing his brothers and behaving like this? What's happening here? And that's why I say I think we must say that it's an ideological dispute. And even so, the Torah tells us that it was unacceptable. The Torah is teaching us this lesson that it leads somewhere that's not good. And it's not because they had a dispute. It's the way they behaved about the dispute that's the problem. That Joseph should have realized that, look, they don't agree, and I accept it. He pushed it too far. And he had to, and they were the majority, and he needed to show them more respect. He was just pushing and pushing his approach. And maybe it was the more true approach. But human beings sometimes can't handle the full truth. And sometimes when you're on a very high level, it's very hard to see that. You know, when you're a genius, it's hard to understand people who are not. And they could say that's the difference between Joseph and his brothers. Joseph was unique. He was maybe like a king, but I think maybe you can argue. I have to admit, some of this is I'm thinking on my own. So may God forgive me if any of this is mistaken. But most of it's based on things that the rabbi said. But if there's any of it that's wrong, please God forgive me. And you can all take it with a grain of salt that it's said by Rabbi Weissman and not any other authority. But what's my point? Oh, the point about the dream that he's saying that he's the king, right? So it appears like, so what I'm saying, what I would like to say is, and I think that this is also clear from things that the sages say about the dispute between the brothers, is that this dream was that he was trying to say, see, my approach to Judaism is correct. And what he may not have realized is that's not what the dream was saying at all. He got it wrong. The dream was saying that, was giving him a comfort that your approach is correct in an idyllic state, but not in this world. In this world, the brothers are correct, not you. But in other words, what the dream was to tell him, he did not understand. The dream was to tell him, you need to conform to your brothers. And the way you're going to do that is by knowing deep down that you have the truth, the pristine truth, but it's too high for human beings. And therefore, that's not the level of the masses. And that's not something that you're going to, the regular approach is going to be like the brothers. And that's why Judah is going to be the king, not you. Why? Because Joseph represents the perfect saint. He represents the perfect tzaddik, right? He had a test. He didn't fall. He met the test. I mean, you can argue a little bit, he did certain things wrong, but I mean, the Torah is showing us that he faced a very difficult test of sexual test, which is extremely difficult, and he overcame that. He even though it put himself in a lot of trouble, that was a big self-sacrifice he made, and he did it anyway. He knew that he could get in tremendous trouble. That was his mistress. Anyway, but getting back to this, the point is that Joseph was a pure righteous person. And Judah is the repentant, right? And the same thing, his descendant David, King David, is also considered like the greatest of penitents. The approach for the masses of the people is that of the penitent, not the perfect righteous person. And so what Joseph was trying to tell them, hey, I got a dream that I'm the king, that didn't mean what he thought it meant. It meant that, yes, your approach is superior in the eyes of God, but that's not the way that, that's not the approach that's supposed to govern. The approach that's supposed to be taught to the masses and the masses are supposed to follow is the path of Judah, not yours. Judah is going to be the king, not you. So, I mean, he didn't know that yet. No one knew that yet because Judah didn't fall and make a mistake. And interestingly enough, Reuben did do something off color, and he was repenting for it at the time during some of the time this was going on, this dispute. That's another point, but it's not for tonight. There's another point about that, but it says that Reuben disappeared when Joseph was sold by his brothers, and he returned. So Rashi says, where was he? So there's two interpretations of where he was. I think one is that it was his day to serve his father. The other one is that he was busy with his penitence. He was busy with his sackcloth and fasting because he mixed up his father's bed, which the verse again is very harsh about. Our Masorah, our tradition is that he did not sleep with his father's concubine, with his father's maid servant, with Bilhah. He did not do that. And it makes sense that that's correct because he's not brought to task about it. And immediately in the same verse, it counts all the brothers as equal and everything. And he's never really, so but the fact is he disrespected his father in a very serious way by because of his reaction to, I think he took his father's bed out of Bilhah's tent. So anyway, he was fasting because of his sin. I mean, you can just imagine a little bit like what kind of people we're talking about. One time he was disrespectful for his father. He's been fasting for years about this. That's something. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. The seriousness of honoring a parent in this week's portion is just mind-blowing. It's another topic. Talking about how Jacob was punished for the 22 years he wasn't with his father. And you ask yourself, but he was busy. He was raising children and he was where his mother sent him. So why is he punished? It's unbelievable. It shows you, like, for the patriarchs, even that somehow he didn't do that. That was wrong somehow. It needs a whole other class to try to understand why he was punished for those years when he was busy raising children, which is his own command, right? Raising children, he had wives, he was working. You can argue about the year he spent the time he spent in Sukkot when he returned to the land of Canaan. That you could start asking, why did he stop there? Why did he go to Shechem? Okay, those are valid questions. Why didn't he return home to his father immediately? But the years that he spent, in Aram, at Laban's house, why is he being brought to task on that? It's really fascinating. Maybe because he didn't do what he could have. He didn't send enough messages. He didn't think about his father. Evidently, he could have done more. He didn't do. You have to say that. It's only rational. I mean, you have no choice to say that. You can't say it was only because he was away. But it wasn't his fault he was away, was it? Or you could say, he should have tried to arrange things differently and leave earlier. But however you cut the cake, the bottom line is you see the incredible weight of honoring a parent, that he didn't see Joseph for all those years because as payment for that, measure for measure. He sat in not only that, he didn't know, he thought he was dead. He sat in mourning for 22 years. He suffered. And the sages say that at least a part of that was because, they just said because he didn't honor his father for 22 years. Wow. Unbelievable. It's really scary. We're so, as Americans or modern people, like a parent. We don't really know what it means to honor a parent, like, maybe some other cultures. We don't really know what that means. We don't really have an honor culture in the first place, so it's foreign. All right. Anyway, so that's that. Now, some of our other things that we talk about, going back to Tehillim, Psalm 119. So we've talked about verse 5 quite a bit. So we see between verse 5 and 6 that there's this connection there. So verse 5, again, talks about how a person is beseeching God to keep his path straight, to keep the statutes. Now, by the way, the word that's used for statutes or for commands here is chukecha, your statutes, and a chok in Hebrew means what? A law, according to the sages, a law that we can't understand. it's something that's is engraved, because the word chok also is related to the word for engravement, for an engraving. So it's something that you have to keep, even though you don't understand it. Something that it's despite, in other words, it's something. Well, just like something engraved doesn't change with the weather and everything. You just have to keep this, even though you don't understand it. So the Malbim, just actually in passing, mentions the fact that his approach is that a statute, I'll call it that word, the chukim, are laws that they do have a reason. We just don't know the reason. God knows the reason. There are reasons there, but they're known to God, not to us. They're not just no reason. In the Chabad Hasidic approach, it's interesting because Chabad means intellect. I mean, the acronym Chabad means wisdom, understanding, knowledge. That's what Chachma, Bina, Dad. However, part of one of the fundamental ideas in Chabad Hasidus is that there are things that are more powerful than intellect, particularly conscious thought. In other words, our deepest strength and power come from something deeper and stronger than reason. I got a question, and since I didn't ask if anyone had any questions in my discussion, which I should have, but please forgive me for not, I'm going to take it, and maybe I should have also stopped to ask if anyone had any questions on that long monologue about Joseph and his brothers or something. I had a question. Where is it here?
Aaron Fry has a question.
Chat. Here we are. Chat. It says, was part of Jacob's, this is from Sharon, was part of Jacob's suffering not knowing Joseph was alive, and the fact that Joseph never tried to tell him no, he was, yes, of course, yes. He suffered because he didn't know that, well, it was a very strange situation. In a certain sense, you could have to ask yourself, why didn't he know that Joseph was alive? So he thought that Joseph had perished, that he was what do you call it, mauled. He was that he was ripped apart by a wild beast. What he thought. He thought he was killed by a lion or something, which happened in those days a lot more often than it does today, obviously. Lions and leopards were common in ancient Israel, as were bears, as King David says that he killed the lion and the bear. So they were commonplace in those days. And so when the brothers sent the tunic, Joseph's colored tunic, with the blood, Jacob understood that he was devoured by a wild beast. Anyway, so he thought that his son was dead, but at the same time, strangely enough, our sages say that there's a decree of heaven that for a person who's deceased and the relatives, they get over it eventually. But if someone doesn't die and they just disappear from your life, that stays with you. But interestingly, Jacob didn't realize this for some reason. Anyway, but I don't want to get too far afield because we were on another topic now. So, but yes, that was the thing that he thought he lost him, right? For 22 years, he thought he had died, and clearly that's something that broke his heart. Really, really broke him a lot. Something, that's another topic for another time. But anyway, let's get back. So let me get back to this, and it doesn't seem like anyone else has any more questions on the Chumash portion that I said, so I'm going to move on back to the Psalms portion here. Okay. So again, statutes are things that they have no reason, but they have a reason before God. And there's another approach too that ultimately they come kind of from a higher place than even reason. In other words, they're dictated by something even higher than reason. In a certain sense, you could say that about all the commandments too. That they're dictated, that they come from a place within, quote, within God, so to speak. We can only understand it in human metaphors, but look, here's the point. There's certain things in your life that you do because your mind tells you that they make sense and they're beneficial. There's certain things you do in your life because you couldn't think of being different. Sometimes that may be the way we stand up for a child. Let's say there's one of, God forbid, a person like, or mother has a child at risk, a child that she's. I don't know, I wish I wouldn't give this example, but it's a terrible, tragic example, but it brings out the point. There was this. If a mother sees their child, God forbid, fall into the water, an infant, and she doesn't know how to swim, she may just dive in after it also. Because it's coming from somewhere deep inside that she has to save that child. She doesn't think about it. She has to do whatever she can, even if it doesn't make sense. So the idea in Chabad that is really a repeating theme is that there are there's a deeper impetus sometimes, there's deeper reasons for things than reason. And that reason always has a counter argument. There's always a counter argument. Once there's a reason, also the idea of reason is I'm not doing something because of the thing itself. I'm doing it because of what it brings about. That itself is something that's a little bit causes a lacking. In other words, if I'm explaining to you why I'm doing something, that means I'm not doing it because of the thing itself. I'm doing it because of some objective. So there's something a little bit missing. So, but in any event, so that's something just to give you a little background on the idea of the word of a chukim, a chukecha, of your statutes, God's statutes. But the point is that King David is saying is that when it comes to these statutes, I followed them. I didn't understand their reasons. That's why it says that please straighten my path that I should guard your statutes. So why does it talk about following the statutes, meaning walking and doing them, as opposed to other commandments? Because here you can't be busy with the reasons. You can't understand the reasons. They're beyond reasons. So you're busy with just carrying them out and maybe knowing them well enough to understand how they need to be carried out. And you don't understand, even though you don't understand the underlying purpose behind it or what it may represent and so on. But King David is saying, please help me do them. I should carry them out. And obviously, yeah, they're harder because I don't understand them. And because I don't understand them, it's harder to carry them out correctly. Look, in other words, if I know the underlying reason for something, then I may be able to know how to apply it better. Like we said before, let's say if something is all about bringing peace. So I know how to go about doing that a lot better. It's not just a mechanical thing. Like if I say, don't say slanderous talk. Okay, but what's slanderous talk? Something that causes hatred, discord, puts someone down, so I can understand it. Otherwise, it's mechanical, and I'm not going to know sometimes what is slander, what isn't, because it really depends on context and a lot of different things. But now that I know the reason, I can follow it appropriately. And also it's easier because if I'm a person looking to create peace, I won't come to doing it because I'm not following, that's not my objective. But when it comes to statutes, it's much harder because you don't really understand them. So you're more distant from them. It's also maybe a little harder to absorb because you don't understand them very well. So anyway, so King David is praying that he should follow them. And within following, there's three components. There's the actual doing. There's the speaking about them verbally, learning the Torah about them verbally, which helps you to remember them and follow them. And then there's the thinking about them. It's all part of the doing because, in other words, you're doing all these things in order to know them well, in order to carry them out. But it's all the focus is carrying it out. So you have to study them. and verbalize so that you retain the knowledge and don't forget. And then you have to carry it out. The next verse says, then I will not be embarrassed. I will not be put to shame when I gaze at all your commandments. So the commentaries explain this idea of all your commandments, that it has to do with the previous verse, that the point is that if a person's careful with the statutes, and of course they're careful with the rest that they understand, so then they will be following all the Torah as a whole, and then they will not be put to shame. What's the put to shame? The put to shame is failing to do some of Torah. I mean, that's a simple interpretation. I mean, there's a couple of deeper points here. One of them is something that is profound that I saw this year, and I don't remember the exact place, but it was in Deuteronomy several times. Moses, and maybe if I have a chance, I could try to find where, but you could try to look it up yourselves, try to find the spot maybe on a computer or something. But there are several times Moses says, "Ushmartem et hamitzvah," or mitzvah. He says, and you should keep the commandment, singular. And the question is always, which one? What is he talking about? Which commandment? Right? And there's also the famous verse that says, that says, because this commandment that I command you today is not distant from you, etc., right? In Deuteronomy. Also, the commandment, singular. What is this commandment? Which one is it? Why doesn't he explain it? So there are a lot of different approaches. Sometimes it's contextual, it's talking about repentance, some other things different. But there's another approach, and that is, what it means is the mitzvos as a whole. In other words, they make up one body. They are one, and you can't really separate them. In other words, what Moses is telling the people is, you must keep them all. And when you keep, because they're all part of a unified whole, and you have to keep all of them in order for, if you don't keep all of them, then each one of them is deficient. Because because when you have a piece of I don't know if this is the best example, when you have a piece of a puzzle, you never lose their awareness that it's just a piece. It's not a whole. That's a deficiency. In other words, and that's what it's saying over here, that because it's this common problem that people tend to do the mitzvahs they understand, and they tend to be weak about the ones they don't understand. King David's saying, no, I didn't do that. And now I'm not ashamed to gaze at the commandments. Because if I did do that, if I was missing, they'd all be missing. Just so you know, that's the more profound interpretation, but the simple interpretation I see in some of the commentaries is that it means when a person reads the Torah and he comes across, the commandments that he doesn't understand, he won't be embarrassed that he didn't keep them. In other words, the rational things a person can know without reading Torah. So a person may come to studying Torah later in life and not feeling embarrassed they didn't keep something. But in terms of the statutes, if you don't find out, eventually when a person studies Torah, whether that's in this world or the next world, they'll be embarrassed that there were so many things that they didn't keep. So I was thinking, how does this apply to Noahide in terms of the whole idea of statutes? I mean, first of all, it applies in terms of keeping there's an area of it that people don't understand. One part of it that people might not understand is the idea that the Maimonides says that all the 7 should be kept, not because they were given to Noah, but because they were given to Moses and Har Sinai, and they should be done with that condition. That's something that's not so rational. And I think it's harder for Ben Noach to do. Because again, you're connecting to the the children of Israel. And I think there may be a tendency, at least for maybe some people, to feel like this is our thing. Why do we have to get involved with them again, so to speak, or something? The point is, it demands a certain humility, and it demands, again, acceptance of a tradition. It's not rational why it has to be done that way. Rational is it's moral. You shouldn't hurt others, etc., etc. As many times I have heard people, Bnei Noach say that this is, this promotes peace and this is the moral way of living. But this condition is not needed. It's not a needed condition. Yet Maimonides says that in order for it to fulfill them properly, they need to be kept with this condition. So that's a kind of a statute that the Bnei Noach have, because it's beyond the rational requirement. So, in other words, what it's telling the Bnei Noach is, even though it's rational and it all makes sense to you, don't just do it because of that. Do it like a statute. Do it because Moses said so, because God said so. Isn't that really what it's saying? And there's so this is really, it's fascinating because it comes back to an idea that the Lubavitcher Rebbe writes about in some of his Hasidic discourses, which is that when the Torah refers to statutes, it's not just referring to the ideas that we usually think of statutes, meaning laws that we can't understand, but all the mitzvahs in a certain sense are statutes. All the mitzvah. In what sense? What we just said. They need to be kept because they're the will of God, not because you understand them, because they make sense morally, because it's good for for social cohesiveness and so on. It needs to be kept because it's God's will. And so all mitzvot, all commandments have this in common. All God's instruction, that they need to be kept because they're God's will, not because we understand them. Even though we don't understand them, doesn't matter. That shouldn't be the underlying reason. And so that element of statute applies to Bnei Noach also. So that's very fascinating. And that might be also
Rabbi,
what unifies.
Rabbi, I just real quick, I just need to remind you, we also have another class at 7:30. Just letting you know.
Oh yeah, I'm not a problem.
Yeah,
not a problem at all. Yes,
I didn't know if you knew or not, so thank you.
I didn't know, but I usually finish around now anyway. We're kind of a little overtime tonight. Okay, it's fine.
Thank you.
So this concept is a unifier. The concept of doing all the mitzvahs because they're God's will is something that all commandments have in common, and it's the thread that connects them all and makes them one body. All right, so questions, comments on anything, and feel free to, I'm going to try to, again, I'll work on it a little bit more, try to stop, take more pauses to take questions, but if you don't see that, please feel free to jot it down, and we can talk about it at the end of the class. Thoughts, comments, questions, opinions that you want to put in the opinion box, or what is that called that you used to have in school? I think it was like an opinion box or something you put in. What was it?
Yeah, my
The
opinion
suggestion box.
has a shredder.
Suggestion box. That's it. Thank you. It was a suggestion box. Yeah.
Sandy, did you have something you wanted to say?
I do, but Ron, your volume is really low. I can barely hear you. I don't know if it's just me or anybody else.
Okay, how about now? Is it any better?
That's good.
It is better? Thank you.
Yes.
How has my volume been?
Oh, it was good.
Okay, good.
I just had one comment, Rabbi. Earlier in the class, you were talking about being grateful. gratitude and all
Yeah.
that. I was in a class this morning with Rabbi Wolbe, and he made the statement, he was talking about gratitude and being grateful. And he said, if in the morning you wake up and the only things you have are what you were grateful for today, what would you have? Wow, that made me stop and really think, okay, I might not have very much. I mean, I'm grateful, but do I really take time each day to express that and just say, I'm grateful for this, 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 and this. So, but that was kind of a thought-provoking question.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing question. It is an amazing question. And I mean, if you think about children and how happy they are, boy, if we could get back a little bit of that, right?
I'm telling you right now, I think most of us might even put some money on that. Go re-energize ourselves.
Right?
And to see
How
the
about just
world
that,
through-
just the excitement of being alive? Just like feeling just the energy and vitality of life, living.
But here's the big blunder. What happens when we transition from this life to that ultimate place? We're going to go, what in the world was I thinking? That was fantastic. I thought it was miserable while I was there, and I thought I wasn't achieving anything. You know, it's like,
Right.
it's going to be such a challenge. And it's going to be like, you know, now people that go to space, most people don't even pay attention to it now, right? Most people don't pay attention. But the first guy that went into space and went around the earth, the first guy, he didn't do anything but just go around the earth, parades through New York City and Chicago.
Yeah. And something's new, but that's the problem we have, is that
Right.
once we become accustomed to something, it loses its zest, and now we need something new.
Right. No, that you're absolutely right. It has a huge influence.
So, but you're hitting
I
on
have the
something so important, and that
recommendation.
is if we realize the great opportunity, like, and how amazing it is just to be alive, because as we're alive, we can perform Torah and mitzvahs that we can't do in that world.
Right.
We can only do it now.
And we have even, and this is what is so incredible in the world, the construct of the world as we see it right now is a garden, a smorgasbord of mitzvot. Like they're everywhere right now, just everywhere. You don't have to look far to find them. And that's what's so beautiful. Hashem is giving us at this time before the age of Mashiach, the transformation. He's given all of these opportunities, and people that do the negative mitzvahs, they get more opportunity to do more negative mitzvahs.
Right. They have the opportunity to restrain from, you know, prohibited things and stuff. It's very, it's just easier to do anything. So the point is, it's like the famous statement in the prophets, was it in Zechariah? No, I forget now, maybe Hosea. But the paths of God are how do you translate to English again? The paths of God are straight. The righteous walk on them, and the transgressors or the wicked stumble on them, right?
Right.
That's what it says. So the point is that this whole scenario we have now, everything's easier. So it's easier for you to indulge in any type of impure thing. It's also easier for you to do a mitzvah. It's never been easier to study Torah than today. It's never been easier to give charity than it is today.
Right.
You know, just to get simple of it. It's never been easier, really, for a lot of people to go maybe to synagogue. I mean, with cars and things like that,
right,
more often than people used to be able to.
And think about how easy it is for someone in the nations to learn what we're teaching.
Correct. Right.
Like,
online classes.
Online, free. They just go in and click and watch the class. It's absolutely incredible.
Torah in so many different languages that things like that weren't available. Yeah, I mean, it's so we have
Right.
things easier in order, and I think really this reflects the end of times, and that we're kind of God has kind of accelerated the process of letting those who want to follow a certain negative,
Right.
let's start with the positive. Those who want to do mitzvahs to have a lot of opportunities to just like Pac-Man, boop, 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 boop. Like you said, just eat them up, eat them up, keep eating them
Right.
up. And on the other way, chas v'shalom, God forbid, the opposite, that there's opportunities to involve oneself in hedonism. And people, for example, people don't want to work or whatever. I mean, someone doesn't want to work and just be hedonist or whatever. You could probably get away with it today because it's
No,
like
yeah,
once
yeah.
upon a time you had to work hard, you had to be married, you had to do all these things, so you probably would starve.
But
Now
here's
you don't have to. Now you
here,
want to be a pig, you can be a pig. You want to
right
be,
here,
you
here's
get
the
away with it. I mean,
here's the problem is every individual, whatever decision you make, you still have to face who you really are and what you need to change to be that better person. We got to answer these last two questions. We
yeah,
got
let's
to
get
go.
to it.
So
Sharon?
Cheyenne's first.
Cheyenne, okay, Cheyenne, yes. Cheyenne? Where'd you go? There you go. Hello.
All right. Okay. Sorry. Hi. I just had a comment based off of what Sandy was saying too, and that is something that I started practicing maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. And so one thing I do in the morning is have like a personal prayer time called Hitbodedut, and the first third of it is purely just thanking Hashem for everything, and that your limbs are working, you can see, you have your hands, you have your eyes, you have your house, the electricity was on, all of that. And I think it's so important, like what you were saying, because if we only had what we thank Hashem for, who knows? But also on the positive, like we have so much because Hashem has given us, and that gratitude is just, it's changed my life and made me grateful for situations, but also those days where we're really like not in the mood and feeling very grateful. One advice that I got from one of my women I take classes with for like Amuna is that we should envision like what would our life be like without this. So even sometimes when I'm groggy in the morning and I'm waking up and thanking Hashem that he gave me my like my soul back, sometimes I'm like half asleep and I like to envision like, what would my kids' life be without me? That would be horrible. And it adds this level of gratitude. So this level of like, really, like you were saying, like imagine that we didn't, and then that can drive us all forward in our prayer and thanking Hashem, like, wow, I do have this today. And so I think you're on something good. And I think it's something that all of us can do and should do is really be grateful like kids, like Rabbi was saying. So.
But Rabbi Wolbe's idea is really powerful and potent. Like thinking, like you said, Cheyenne, about just thinking about what your life would be like without certain things is like really strong and makes it so much easier to be grateful and be happy with your lot, as opposed to always focusing on what we don't have and this one thing that we don't have. But there's also something else. Like sometimes we should think deeply about, like if this idea of Hashem is good, and if we don't have something, what might be the reason why we don't? Maybe there's a good reason for it. I mean, that takes a lot of really deep meditation, but we may be able to realize usually it's a spiritual reason why we may not have something. Sometimes it may be because of us. Sometimes it may, complex, but this is a simple, great idea, is just think about if we'd be missing things that we have, where we'd be at, as they say. And it's once we realize that we could lose those things and how we just let ourselves feel that feeling of, and then turn it around, and now we have them, we feel a lot better. So thank you for sharing all that, Sandy and Cheyenne. Sharon, please.
I was just thinking, because when you know, when I was with my grandkids and everything, when they were little, or my children, it's like, I believe there's another facet of why we have children is because everything is so new to them. You know, they see the sun or they see the flowers. I can remember my granddaughter sitting in a clover patch and I was just watching the bees just dancing around on the clovers around her, but it was so amazing to her, you know, and it kind of wakes up that wonder in us, you know, that gratefulness for the things we get too busy and we get too grown up and we just get too, you know, in everything else and we forget to appreciate. You know, kids just have this way of seeing the wonder in everything or asking the questions, and I love it.
Yeah, we should all try to get back to it a little bit. Exactly. I couldn't have said it better like that. And I think that's a real happiness. That's a pure, true happiness is like, because it's coming from inside, just being happy to be alive. It's not about I have something and I don't have something and the next accomplishment. You know, I got this car. That's not real happiness. Real happiness comes from inside. And it just, I think it's kind of happiness to be alive. And anyway, it's too long of a discussion and we've gone way over time. It's funny that
Yes,
Rod is here tonight. Because
yes.
usually I'm not such a troublemaker. I really don't go this late usually.
Well,
This is very unusual.
Just blame it on me, but here's the thing. I could also keep going as well, but we got to go. So anyway,
Yes.
you
All right,
guys,
everyone.
shalom,
Thanks so
shalom.
much
Next
for
class
joining me
starts in about
and
3
going
seconds.
over time with me.
Okay.
Have a wonderful evening. Everyone should be well. Laila tov.
Laila tov.